This is Creepy and Geeky. Welcome. I'm your host, Robert, and my guest today is Kat Voleur. Kat is a writer whose recent pieces are in Erie River's Fire Anthology and Divergent Terror from Off Limits Press. She also co-hosts two podcasts, Slasher Radio and This Horror Life. Kat joins me to talk about the Friday the 13th movies, A New Beginning and Jason Lives. Welcome to the show, Kat.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Yeah. We've been
You
kind of
are
dancing
always,
around having you on a couple
yeah,
of
you're
times.
always
And
doing the most interesting things, and I'm always so
oh,
late to the party.
well, thank you. I
Yeah.
appreciate that. I try to be interesting. I don't always succeed, but I'm glad that it worked out and we could get you on for this, and
I
I'm
am
sure
too.
it'll be
I'm
a
so
great
glad.
conversation. All right. Well, we started to talk off air. We were talking about the Friday the 13th box set,
The
which
box
I
set.
cracked into to I finally cracked into to watch these for this series. And you were telling me about Friday the 13th of your history. So go ahead with that.
Yes. My so when I was little, I think it Freddy versus Jason was like one of the things that started it because I wanted to
Mm,
see it. The trailers were coming out right around the time I was starting to get really into the genre, and but I have to watch things chronologically. And so I decided that I was going to watch all the Friday the 13th films, and it was one of those like because I was still pretty young when all of this was
okay.
happening, and my parents were like they were okay with me watching classics. They kind of preferred that to the stuff that I was like trying to get into theaters to see. So they're
Right.
like, it's fine. You can go ahead and watch them. But it was kind of a test of endurance because in comparison to like some of the newer stuff that was coming out, I felt that not all of the classics, because like Nightmare on Elm Street ate those up, but Friday the 13th starts a lot slower. And as a
Yeah.
kid, it was like I wasn't as into it as some of the others. I didn't consider myself a huge Friday the 13th fan. And the Shout Factory, Scream Factory, the big beautiful box set came out like this last year on the and the other podcast Slasher Radio. Everyone got one except for me, and I was on the fence about it. It's like I don't know if I need like how often am I gonna really go back and watch all of the Friday the 13th movies. I watch the first one sometimes like on Friday the 13th, but
Right.
I don't know if I need this. I don't know if I want to spend this much money on it. And it went on sale, and both of my co-hosts are like sending me links every day. They're like, "It's on sale, Cat." And I was like, I don't know about this. But then I saw the art and it's like, all right. I have to do this. This is one of the most gorgeous box sets I've ever seen. And even
Oh
if it
yeah.
just sits on my shelf next to my other box sets, it'll round out the collection. It's gonna be nice. It is unbelievable how much use I've gotten out of it I think I've had it for about a year. I also like Friday the 13th way more as an adult than I ever did as a kid.
Yeah. Yeah.
There are like so many intricacies and stuff. And I was when we did our rankings list, we actually went through and we ranked all of the Friday the 13th movies. And not only it was like some of the ones I had remembered liking ended up being at the bottom of my list. Some of my least favorites were at the top. And I've watched these movies so much recently. Like they're just always on my mind because of that box set.
That's funny. Yeah, no, that artwork was stupendous. I was telling you off air that it's by Devin Whitehead, and he's been doing a lot more artwork for them. It just got announced uh the other day that there's a 4K version of Bubba Hotep coming out, and he's doing the slipcover and poster artwork for that as well. So he's just kind of all over the place. And yeah, when this box set got announced, I snapped it up as soon as possible because they had the poster with it with the box artwork. in a big poster. So I was like, oh yeah, I'm grabbing that as fast as possible.
Oh,
So
that's wonderful.
yeah, it's great. Friday the 13th was always one of those ones that, so I grew up in the 80s. And
Mhm.
so, Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street were like the two big ones during that era. And I remember as a kid liking both of them, but I kind of edged more for Nightmare on Elm Street because Freddy was jokey and funny. And then as I've gotten older, and like you said, as you've gotten older, that you've turned towards Jason a little bit more. And like I don't know what that says about people that they kind of like Jason a little bit more. But I really like the series, even though it's super repetitive, especially in the
Yeah.
early movies. Um, but they get wild. So, and I think this is kind of that, the movies that we're looking at tonight, they are kind of the turning point for that as well. We're looking at numbers 5 and 6, and they're parts 2 and 3 of the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. So that's it's an interesting little segment of the whole mythos, because the time kind of takes a huge jump between
Yeah.
the last one, number 4, and number 5. So it's interesting because technically speaking, that number 5 should take place in like 1989, um, which is very odd. So, but yeah, so let's get into it. We'll start talking about number 5, which is a new beginning. Uh, so tell me your thoughts on that.
So 5 is really, it's an interesting one. It's got the same kind of whodunit setup as and this is
Right,
something that I love is that, because Jason's such an iconic slasher, he's got one of the highest kill counts.
right,
These movies were known for the kills. I think a lot of people forget that it started kind of as a whodunit, but even looking at it from that side, it can't quite land the format because like the first one, it's someone that you haven't really met yet. Like there's that sense of
right,
suspense. This one is really good at it, except for that you don't know it's a whodunit until after like you've lost the chance to
right.
solve the mystery, which
Yeah,
I think is just like it didn't quite stick that landing. But I think it was interesting to see it go back to its roots as a franchise in 5. And I actually critically, I think it's one of the worst in the series, but it's so much fun to watch.
it's very
Uh,
trashy. Yeah.
it is, but it's fun trashy, you
Oh
know?
yeah, yeah.
Like,
I I think that's indicative of the whole series, though. Like even the trashiest, weirdest uh uh um parts of it, like whichever movie it is, there's always something fun about it.
yeah. And I think this is one of the most fun because some of the other ones that make it near the bottom of my list, I don't really like to rewatch as much because I
Right,
feel that they're, slower, the laughs aren't as much. But like this is a movie I feel like I could get drunk and have people over and,
right.
we get some popcorn and it's a party because it's entertaining. There are a lot of moments in this where you're like, what? Why is this a good idea? You know?
Right. Yeah, no, I think that it's funny too because number 6, a lot of people talk about number 6 and it's their favorite movie, and they talk about how number 6 really kind of brought comedy to the series, but number 5 really has a lot of comedy in it as well. That intentional or not, just you're just like the was her name, Ethel, the like the dirty hillbilly lady next door.
Oh,
She's
absolutely.
she's hilarious, and it's just it's weird too. It's like it's a funky performance, and you're just like, okay, is this meant to be a caricature or what? And it's just
And I love that
very
you
odd.
don't quite know. Uh,
Right.
you're laughing at it because it's bad, but then like it's funnier because you genuinely can't tell if they were being sincere in it or not.
Right.
I think
Like were
5
they
might be the funniest in like I laugh the most during 5.
Yeah, after having watched them over the course of the last day, I and it's been a while since I had seen them, that it was interesting that I did find five to be uh funnier in a lot of ways. That number six has definitely some good funny moments, but it like I guess it felt this time it felt like a couple of the funny moments where some did land okay, some were really trying a little too hard. um
Yes.
and so I thought, at least five, even though it was possibly and probably unintentional, at least the comedy landed a little bit better for me. So
And I love that you brought up Ethel also. I would love to see everyone's been talking because the new series is coming out about like what kind of spin-offs they would love to see.
yes.
I would love to see an Ethel backstory directed by Rob Zombie. That's
Oh
like
God. Oh
she
geez.
feels so much like one of those characters, you know?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um
Yeah, as much as I'm not a huge Rob Zombie fan. He's okay, but most of his movies don't really like. I'm not the target audience for them.
yeah.
So it's but but no, I think you're totally right. I think that Ethel would would make a good, at least for an episode. I don't know if we need a whole
We
series
probably
about
don't
her,
need a
but
whole
definitely like
series.
a definitely like an episode or two, maybe written and directed by Rob Zombie. I'd be okay with that.
And and it's one of those things because that was, I'm not going to say it wasn't a caricature at all, but it was something that we saw a little bit less of, I feel like, and it just it was so because we had that wave in the 2000s where Rob Zombie got popular and all movies had a
Oh
character
yeah.
like this. So it was really interesting to find one in
Yeah.
Friday the 13th. Just and she felt very out of place. Like she
Oh,
felt like she
very
was
out of
from a
place.
different movie.
Yeah.
She had her
Yeah.
whole other horror movie going on, and
Yeah.
it just kind of intersected with Friday the 13th in this really weird way.
Yeah.
Um,
No,
I also,
go
I think
ahead.
one of the funniest moments for me, I think one of the just, and it's so dumb, it's so insignificant, but Reggie's brother, I can't think of his name, but just him and
Beeman.
his girlfriend, their interactions.
Oh yeah.
So funny. Like he's going to the bathroom and she's singing to him outside the bathroom.
Yeah.
It's like, is this what relationships are like? Like,
She's singing him that is that supposed to help him go better? I don't like go faster. Like, yeah, I didn't
is
really
this what happens
understand.
every time they have Mexican food? Because they should stop. Like,
Right. Oh no, yeah, no, that was definitely a very odd moment for sure. Um I thought it was interesting too, because I think um the having watched both of these, uh the level of gore and violence was very low to me. I guess I'm used to modern movies, I guess a little bit more, where
yeah.
we see a lot more. And it's funny to now go back and look at at least these two so far, and see that the I mean, the kills were fine, and you got to see a little bit of gore in the after effect, but most of the actual like strikes or slashes or whatever were off screen, and so you didn't really see anything. And so I thought that was an interesting um observation, because the 80s, and especially these kind of slasher movies, were known for being like so violent and so gory and everything, and yet these were fairly sanitized,
They
especially considered to
were.
today.
And
So
especially five, I feel like it was
oh yeah.
maybe not like out of the entire franchise, but I feel like they had kind of been getting progressively gorier. And
Yeah.
then five actually feels like kind of a step down from four, where
Yeah.
they don't like a lot's implied, but they don't really show as much as I feel like they could have.
Right. And I think that's interesting too, because five has a lot more nudity than most of the other uh episodes of this series. so it was interesting to see that you're getting a lot more nudity, but a lot less of the gore and violence. So
Yeah.
it was interesting, especially because the direct and maybe that was because the director was from a I guess from a softcore background, and so he was up in the one and I know that from what I read was that Paramount went in and chopped a bunch of it out to appease um, the ratings board before it even got there. So
Man, I always wish that I could see what got chopped out of these movies, you
yeah,
know? Because it's like I'm sure with some films it makes a huge difference, but it's like what could they have shown us in Friday the 13th Part 5? That was just too much. Where was that line?
yeah, that I like that since I don't know maybe the 90s on we started getting these. I mean, I guess since DVD came out that we started getting these unrated cuts of
Yeah.
stuff. So there was a lot of so now there are some movies where you get this extra gore and violence if you're willing to pay that extra cost to get those versions of it. So it's interesting to get that nowadays when and that's something that would have been great in the 80s with these movies, but we don't a lot of that material's not even available anymore. So
Which is so sad because
oh,
I would be very curious to see, especially from a modern lens, like you said, where we are used to more
yeah,
violence, you know?
yeah, I mean, I guess some of us who've been in inundated with horror images and stuff like that, especially maybe the Saw series and stuff that's like really pushes that envelope of of torture and pain and stuff that you're what we're seeing in these earlier slashers is so tame compared to what we got later on. And and maybe that's due to these slashers pushing the envelope but not going past it, I guess pushing the envelope for its time period. And you know because I mean, to be fair, I mean what you used to see even before that was even more off camera and more hidden, and so a lot it pushed it a little bit farther forward. But it's funny to see it now and just go, that was so not like what you expected to be from Reputation.
Right. And Saw it was a good comparison because Friday the 13th was in its time, I think, known as being very over the top and graphic and violent. And Saw I also has that kind of modern reputation where it's like it
Yeah,
known as being but it didn't start that way either, you know,
no,
like and I would love to see some of I think if I could have any unrated like full behind the scenes, I really thought they were going to do that with Spiral, which was
mm,
edited to the point that the traps didn't make sense. And then, they were teasing clips of like, this is what they made us cut out, which was very funny because it's like now audiences really are acquainted to this kind of violence. Why would they make you cut it out? And then they didn't release a full director's cut. I was like,
yeah,
oh no. But I think I imagine I might be way off base with this, because I haven't researched it or anything, but I imagine that five probably had one of the different like the most drastic differences between like the original footage and the theatrical cut of this, because when you think about it there were and this is something that I've noticed about the franchise generally, but five in particular, there are a lot of eye related deaths, and that was a
yeah,
big no-no for a long time.
yeah,
Like you couldn't show eyes getting messed up.
interesting.
And there are Roy, I guess, really liked the eye kills. Like there were a
Yeah,
whole bunch of them in this.
yeah, it's going into that too. Like, let's get into the whole Roy of it. This is
Okay.
the this is the only one that is since the first one that's not been Jason.
Yeah.
And this was Roy, but his motivations were kind of funky to me. Like, I get that his kid got killed by that other patient at the camp or whatever that was. And but it's like, but why go out and kill everybody else? Like like it just
I
didn't make sense to me at all.
it's one of those things. I wonder if they had framed it more like a whodunit, if they could have had another crack at putting those pieces together, because there was
Yeah.
almost something there. Like you get to
Yeah.
meet the dad. There are kind of like there's this trail for you to follow. You know about the previous death, like, but yeah, the pieces don't quite. The I wonder if it's like, because Mrs. Voorhees' whole thing initially was that it was punishing, the
Yeah.
campers more than anything. But like, I wonder if he was trying to punish like the establishment or show that they were incompetent or make it. But we don't know because it wasn't quite.
So I think part of that, though, now thinking about it, part of it is that the original intent of this one was to make Tommy the new killer. It was supposed to end up being him at the end of it all, that it was him that was killing everybody. And then they twisted it and made it uh, Roy at the end. And
This was
so I
worse.
think, yeah. So I think maybe Roy was supposed to be a red herring originally and everything. And uh, so it does seem weird. And then like when they cast the movie, they didn't tell the actors what they were filming. They didn't tell them that it was a Friday the 13th movie. They called it the movie's working title was Repetition, and which is funny. But they so even the actor who played Tommy Jarvis in this one, he was not, I guess, not very happy that it turned out to be a Friday the 13th movie in the end. And so which like they found out when they started filming, but before they started filming, when they were casting, they didn't tell them. And so once they got to filming, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, it's a Friday the 13th movie. And so they're like, oh, okay, this sucks. So so that could inform a lot of these uh acting choices.
That does make a
Because
lot of sense. Because what if they had just tricked him into being the new Jason? Like he signs the contract, they're like, "Oh yeah, this is a Friday the 13th movie. Welcome to the next, four
right.
sequels."
Well, and that's the interesting thing too, is that like I didn't like the performance of Tommy Jarvis in this one. It was very like, I get that he was quiet and he was like meant to be all like you withdrawn because of what happened and everything. But it was just like, I don't know, it just was so pulled back that there was almost nothing of substance to his performance. Um
Yeah, and I think it would have worked better if he had been the new Jason. And I feel I this is one of those things, and I'm sure we'll talk about it a little bit more with six, but
yeah.
because I wouldn't trade any of the mistakes in five for what they gave me in six. But I do it this the Tommy Jarvis arc drives me crazy because they tease
Oh
in
yeah.
four that he's going to be the new one, and this and all of five would have made
Yeah.
more sense if he had
Oh
been
yeah.
the new Jason. And I think six is great. I think he does it. I Tommy Jarvis is great in six. It's the best. It's my favorite of the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. I
Yeah.
I love the setup and the way that it all falls together. But five was ruined by not sticking to that original plan.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think they still could have done both. I think they could have made Tommy Jarvis the new, Jason, but also, give us number six, and as it was, maybe in a different way. I mean, maybe we could have even had a Jason versus Jason, like, a Jason versus Tommy, as Jason, standoff, very
Yeah.
much like Freddy versus Jason. That would have been interesting, but yeah. It just yeah, it didn't coalesce as well as it should have, for sure.
Yeah, and I feel bad because it's like, even I enjoy five, but there's always that looming question of like, what if they had just done it though?
Right. I liked five a little bit more this time than I did last time. It's been a while since I watched them, so I didn't really fully remember them. I've always liked number six. as one of the better ones of the whole series. But and so I always kind of put that a little bit higher than most of them. And I didn't really like. I felt like number 5 was okay, but because it wasn't really Jason, that it just was like eh. But watching it this time, and you having that unintentional or not comedy to it, having this very trashy feel to it, just enhanced it quite a bit for me this time. So,
5 also has, I can't believe it's taken me this long to bring him up, to talk about this. 5 has my all-time favorite Friday the 13th character, Reggie the Reckless. Absolute hero. I love that kid.
yeah,
I
yeah. No, he's great. Yeah,
he's so good. And I remember when we were doing, because it wasn't I've never ranked them like critically from best to worst. I ranked like my favorites. And I
right.
remember everyone harassing me because 5 was too high. And it's like, no, if I can watch a movie with Reggie in it, it's better than a movie without Reggie in it. Like, that's just, that's how it is.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, I
I
thought he
also
was
think it
okay.
had like one of the best showdowns. The full like
Yeah,
someone taking a chainsaw to go after
yeah.
Jason was just like what a what a choice. I
Well, I
loved
think
it.
that it became a better showdown because by and large, it was a more even showdown. Because
Oh, yeah.
ultimately, it's Roy and not actually Jason. And even in 2, 3, and 4, Jason seems to be this almost unstoppable, unkillable character. Um, and so it's by the time you hit 5, and it's like, okay, well, whoever this is obviously isn't Jason, you know.
Yeah.
So, but and it kept it more on even footing at the very least. Uh,
Which was nice. It's kind of it, because there we have so many moments in Friday the 13th and I like them where it's like, how are they possibly going to even make an attempt at getting out of this? You're facing
right.
down someone who seems so indestructible so much of the time. And it was kind of nice to watch something that felt like a fair fight where you didn't know what was going to happen.
Right. No, and he definitely took some pretty brutal hits. Getting hit by that tractor and getting stabbed in the leg. Yeah, it was. I'm surprised he kept going for as long as he did after a couple of those hits. So
Me too.
adrenaline's
And
a
it's
hell of
one
a
of
thing.
it's one of those things. It would have been a dead giveaway if you stab him in the leg and he like screams and then is
Right.
out for the bit. We would have known immediately that it wasn't Jason. And I think it was very effective that he was able to. But you do have to wonder if humans are just stronger in this little encapsulated Friday the 13th universe,
Right.
because some of those should have taken out a non-Jason.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Roy lasted a lot longer than he should have.
Roy's a pretty like we don't talk about him obviously because he's kind of like the shame of the Friday the 13th franchise, but
He kind of is.
but he's a pretty scary killer. Like I wouldn't want to face down Roy either.
Yeah, no, he's pretty good. I mean, he got everybody and in some very brutal ways. So, and it wasn't just the typical Jason slashing either. You go into number 6 and it's very much just Jason shoving things into people, and it's pretty much his whole his whole mode of killing is just shoving something into somebody. So
Yeah.
oh man, um trying to think if there's anything else about number 5. um
Um, can we talk real quick about
sure.
Tommy Jarvis's random martial arts capabilities? They just kind of they showed up out of nowhere. They're not really dwelled upon too much, and then they're just gone in the next movie.
Yeah, there's so many weird choices with this movie that either they just completely just right away, like, and then forget about, or it's just by the next movie they're just like, well, let's they like even by number 6 they're just kind of like, yeah, let's just say number 5 was just some kind of weird fever dream. Because they don't talk, you don't have him talk about, his mask making, which was
No,
a thing from 4 and 5, and just, all this, which is fine, it didn't really come into play, although it could have, very easily come into play uh
very
in number
easily.
6, but nope. Yeah, it's very, very interesting, the choices they've made in this series. Overall, like, movie to movie, some of the choices they make are just wacky and bizarre.
But they did lead up to number 6, which I'm always
Yes,
grateful for 6. It's a fantastic movie.
I think so too. Yeah, I mean, overall, again, it's very light on the gore, in my opinion.
It is.
The kills are fine, but they go by so quick, and they're so, like, a lot of it's off screen, and so you don't really see very much. And so, and it's fine, I get it, but it's very interesting. But so the kills aren't as fun, I think, because I mean that's what we think about when we think of slashers. You're watching for the good fun kills,
You are,
so
especially Friday the 13th.
yeah,
Like, more than any of the classic franchises, I think Friday the 13th is the one that you go to if you want to see some fun kills. That being said, 6 is still the one that I think of. Like, when I think of Friday the 13th, when I think about all my favorite Jason moments, um, 6 is, well, maybe not moments specifically, because then they're more scattered across several movies. But like when I think about the tone of a Friday the 13th movie,
yes,
6 is the one that I want. I'm thinking about zombie Jason. I'm thinking about the lake.
yeah,
I'm thinking about like some laughs, some tension, and I think 6 balances all of that the best.
yeah.
Even if the standout the individual kills were not as good. And I like the characters more in 6 than I do in uh, most of them, in terms of like full casts, I think.
I think
Um,
my only problem with most of the cast in this one was they felt very cookie cutter. At least the friends, the counselors at the camp, they felt very cookie cutter and not super fleshed out. Um, because they were focused predominantly on Tommy and the girl's name. I can't think of her name offhand. Um,
Megan, I want to say, maybe.
yes, Megan. Yes, thank you. Yeah, her dad kept saying it a lot.
uh,
um, and he was a weird dude, that cop, man, that sheriff. He was a hair trigger all the time.
I will say it's kind of a weird. It's a weird situation because I agree with you. I think they're very cookie cutter characters, but I think one of my biggest complaints, one of the things that I had disliked so much about the Friday the 13th franchise, my first time watching it, was that I didn't really like most of the characters. Like there would be
Yeah,
one here or there that would really stand out, but even in terms of like final girls, I felt like there wasn't a lot for me to remember, and I would have mostly forgotten about them by the time the next movie rolled around.
true,
But
true.
like this one, and they are very like archetypal, and the dad is a perfect example because it's like, okay,
Yeah,
he's the dad, he's the protective father, he's a hard ass cop, he doesn't like Tommy, he thinks Tommy's responsible, that's his whole thing, he's gonna go on like hard on this the whole movie, like
yeah,
that's his one character trait. But I remember him, like I remember his one
true.
character trait. It's not perfect development, but like they gave me something, and it set up a dynamic. It set up uh a lot of the plot points of the movie very obviously, but it was kind of, it added some tension there. It made it more interesting when Megan and Tommy get together.
Right.
Her whole thing was being a little bit of a rebel and liking Tommy, and like I remember
Yeah,
it worked.
yeah. No, and I
um
think it's funny to juxtapose these two movies together as well, because with number 5, you got a lot more sex and nudity going on in that one, and then in number 6, there was some slight sexual situation, but no nudity at all. And even the sexual situations that there were more comedic than anything else.
Yeah.
Um, and so it was very interesting to see the difference between these two movies, um, and to see how um, and the fact that number six is typically regarded as one of the best of the series overall. So
Yeah. I do think it's fun that 5 and 6 ended up together because I think they're two of the most different in
yeah.
the I um I think the only way that and I know it was just math that paired these two up. I think the only one that might have been funnier would have been 6 and 7 might be the
Yeah.
two most different. But I think they're a very interesting set. And I like that they're both in the Tommy Jarvis trilogy. I like this version of Tommy a lot more.
Oh
It's
yeah.
it's frustrating because I don't want to. I want to be mad that they went back on
Yeah.
like everything that they had set up, but I can't be because he's more likable. He's
Yeah.
more interesting. I love how, and he makes so many dumb horror movie classic, like frustrating
Right.
decisions, but he's so sincere in them, you know?
Well,
Like
and
he's
his
trying so hard and he screws up pretty much every step of the way.
and the actor's just better too. I think he's
Oh
doing a much
yeah.
better job of portraying the like everything about Tommy. He's not as withdrawn. He's more animated and vocal. I think just because that last performance was so subdued, and I get that they were going for more of the okay, he's obviously the quiet Jason. That's what we're going for, is we're trying to build him up to be the quiet guy, just like Jason is. And so this one was much better because they were obviously not trying to make him that way. They were trying to hit him against Jason in the end. And
And
so it felt like a much better performance to me.
it did. And even though they went back on a lot of the stuff they'd been trying to build up, he still felt like he's the most, other than Jason, he's the most recurring character in the franchise.
Yeah.
It felt like we had seen a bit of his history, and it was even with all of my complaints about how his arc goes, it was nice to see him back again,
Yeah.
for a third one, because I wasn't really expecting it. Um,
Yeah, no, it's an interesting trilogy within the overall narrative, especially because number four was really supposed to be the end of the series.
yeah.
But because number four did so well, they were like, okay, well, let's just keep rolling with it. Very much again, going back to the Saw franchise, where the Saw franchise, they left it open for more, but they weren't sure how well it was going to do. And once every sequel did great, they were like, okay, let's pump out a new one every year, and so,
Yeah.
and that's what's interesting about the Saw franchises, narratively speaking, other than some quibbles here and there, they do a fairly good job at keeping it connected and flowing one into the other, especially for
Oh,
having absolutely no fucking plan.
for
So
having no plan and having so many directors,
yeah.
this is like I'll go on this rant every so often, but people really undervalue how coherent the Saw franchise is. Like
Yes.
again, and especially, there are ones that are more confusing that made like editing choices that were bizarre.
Yeah.
4 confused the hell out of a lot of people. But like
Yeah.
if you have the attention span to like figure out what the fuck is going on in 4, it lines up pretty well. I
Yeah.
not only for all of the production problems that they had, but like for a horror franchise, because when you
Oh
look
yeah.
back at like I think Saw might be up until Spiral, I think it might critically have been one of the best franchises just because it tells a story from that continues on through all of them,
Right.
and I
Yeah, and
you
horror
kind of
movies
have
are
to forgive
not
it.
known. Yeah, horror franchises are not known for consistency within. the franchise alone. Most
Yeah.
franchises are so wildly inconsistent. I can only think of a couple that are even remotely, better than most. Scream franchise, that one's like great. The continuity is solid on those. And
Yeah.
then the Final Destination series is really great for that as well.
Yeah.
Um,
And but both of those, well, uh I won't get into the Scream thing. But Final Destination also had like an outlier. Like it had one film that just was
oh
hard to
yeah,
get past. Uh Scream, I feel like every Scream fan has one Scream movie that they don't like nearly as well as the others, but it's interesting because it's never the same one.
no,
Like
no. Well, now that you brought it up, which one is your least favorite?
it's four.
Oh wow, interesting. Yeah,
I
mine
think
is two.
three is really.
Yeah, I think number two feels like a complete retread of number one. It hits a lot of the same beats, and sure, there's some differences here and there, but it hits a lot of the same beats. And because they put it out literally the next year, I felt like they didn't do enough to change the narrative. And then they did that later on where they fixed it with three, four, and five and stuff. So
See, that's what I'm saying.
yeah,
Everyone has one, and it's always a
yeah,
surprise. I always feel like people are going to say three, and then very seldom
I
do
love
they say
three.
three. Like, which I
Three is
also
my
love three. Three's so
three
much
is like my
fun.
second favorite. So
Um, Four, I actually, my thing with four is that I don't think critically it's the worst, but I like it less every time I see it. Um, which is like a weird thing,
yeah,
but yeah, like so
no,
but I don't feel like there's definitely because four was confusing and seven was critically shaky at best. Seven was a little bit silly, but I feel like there isn't one just like notably worse Saw movie,
right.
which is also because there are always ones like that.
It's
Or
been years since I've seen the Saw franchise, so I couldn't even begin to get into that one yet. That'll be coming in a later series of episodes for me to dive back into that one.
oh, good. I actually one of my first I work my day job. I do scripts for
Okay.
YouTube channels, and one of the first paychecks I ever got, I was billed as a Saw expert because we
Oh wow.
started with the Saw franchise, and that was they asked me how I wanted to be listed, and I wanted to see like how far I could. Uh, but no,
That's
I do
funny.
think it's really but to tie it back around, I feel like a lot of
Yes.
franchises have that weak link, and I feel like Friday the 13th has a couple. Uh,
Oh yeah.
as much as I love it, five is probably one of them. Five's one of the big ones.
But see,
It's why
upon reevaluation, watching it again this time, again, I can find more stuff about it that I can actually say it's not that terrible. It
it's
probably
not.
still ranks low, but there's definitely others that rank just as low, if not lower, for sure.
Yeah,
For
I have
me.
a few that go below this one.
Yeah.
Um, I'm sure everyone has the same bottom Friday the 13th film. And
I
it's
don't know.
spoiler alert, it's not five.
All right, now you got to tell me which one you think is which
Oh,
one is your bottom.
it's gotta be Jason Goes to Hell, right? It's gotta be nine. Has to be.
I think most people, yeah, you're gonna find. I think most people, either it's Jason Goes to Hell or Jason X. So those
That's
are typically the
yeah.
ones that people consider bottom of the barrel.
Jason X is such a funny one for me because it was not only my least favorite Friday the 13th movie, when I saw the franchise first, it was my least favorite movie for like several years. I hated it so much. It is now
That's
my
funny.
favorite Friday movie. It
Oh
is
wow,
it's
that's funny.
the rewatch got me because I took some time away from it. I knew what I was getting into, and it's so campy and fun.
Yeah,
And I love bad sci-fi almost as much as I love horror. So Jason X is like it's like they made it for me.
that's
Um,
funny.
it's the only one that I like more than Part 6. And I don't think it's critically as good. I just think it's more fun.
Yeah,
Uh,
I can see that.
Six critically, I think is the best. Not only we talked about it balancing everything out, but I think it does one thing that no other Friday movie does that I think, and a lot of horror movies of the time also wouldn't do that I think is really brave. I think it's very underappreciated for its time. There are kids. There are
Yeah.
like actual literal children in the camp in part six. And like, even though nothing happens to any of the kids, there's
Right.
that tension there, where it's like, I
Oh
think we
yeah.
have a more primal reaction to seeing children in danger. And
Right.
there's that lingering sense of dread all the way through six, where it's like, oh shit, like this is something could go bad here.
Well, and it's funny too because in four we had young Tommy Jarvis, and in five we had Reggie. So we had kids within these last three, but in each one of those previous two, it was just like one kid.
It was like
But
a
in this
single
one, we
child.
had the whole, yeah, we had the whole like, um, group of children that and he does burst into that cabin to
Yeah.
go. I mean, not necessarily to technically go after them, but you're not sure. So
Yeah, you
it's
just don't
it's
know for
definitely
sure what's going to
yeah.
happen. And I think there was a lot of tension, especially because this is the first time like we've ever seen, and everything lines up, because even with, you mentioned that Tommy and Reggie, they were like only one kid, but also they were not at the camp. Like Jason was out of
Yes.
his element
Yeah.
in that. And this is the first time, we're back at Camp Crystal Lake. Everything's lined up to go really terribly wrong
Right.
for everyone at the camp and their kids. And it's like, oh no.
One
And
thing I did. Oh, go ahead.
oh, just like it's one of those like common sense. You're like, they're probably not going to kill the kids, but also
Right.
it's weird that they're there, so you're not sure.
Well, I think that there was an unwritten rule of the 80s that the kids couldn't die.
Yeah.
Like there was, because it just didn't like it happened once in a while for sure, but it seemed like in a lot of these movies, the kid got out alive, and it just felt like it was an unwritten rule of the
Yeah.
of the of the of all the movies to do that, and so that was interesting to rewatch this and see that again. And but I did think it was funny though that Jason, he's taunted into coming into the lake by Tommy, and I found that interesting because for somebody who drowned in that lake originally, or supposedly drowned in that lake, uh he he just went right into it. You'd think that
Yeah.
you would have thought that he would have hesitated, and there was no hesitation. He just walks right into it. Uh, so I found that a little bit funky.
It
So
was a little bit funny. It was also it it freaked me out the first time I saw it. I think that's one of my most like distinct Friday the 13th memories outside of like problems that I had. I held a grudge as a child. It didn't take a lot to make me mad, which I think is why it took like almost 20 years for me to go back and watch Jason X and realize that I liked it. But it's like I think one of my strongest positive memories of Friday the 13th from my first watch was him going into that lake, because it's like Tommy has this plan, and it's like, and in my head it was like, how is he gonna get him to go back into this lake where he drowned? And then Jason just fucking goes, and I'm like, oh shit, this isn't gonna work. Like,
yeah.
because if Jason's not worried, like that makes me pretty concerned. Um, and I don't know if that was intentional, but that was definitely how it landed for me the first time, where
Right.
Jason was just too confident about going into that lake.
Yeah.
I was pretty sure he was going to be the only one coming out of the lake.
Oh yeah. No, and it gives us one of the more iconic images too of him being chained underneath the water. That
Yeah.
that's just one of those fully iconic images of that era and of that series. Uh, just and I think it's the only time he's done is at the end of this movie and at the beginning of the next.
Yeah.
And so it's interesting, that so, I mean, it's so funny these iconic images that only are part of just a short time period of a movie. So
And Friday as a series, I feel like has a lot of those. where it's just like these
Yeah.
really iconic things that you really only see fleetingly. But yeah, Jason at the bottom of the lake. It's always really interesting for me to because I kind of think of zombie Jason as going right into like seawater Jason, and I sometimes in my head forget that Seven is a movie that exists. Uh, because I always think of I don't know why because I know it's not true, but I always think of Chained Jason immediately going into part 8. Like I always think of that opening to Manhattan, and it's like no, there was a
Yeah.
full movie in between these things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Jason versus Carrie.
oh God, yeah. I almost so when I saw all the ones that were left, I had a really tough time choosing. I misread the tweet first
Yes.
and foremost because I thought I didn't realize that the episodes were being paired up. And I was
Yeah.
having a really tough time. The ones that I was thinking about hopping onto were 6 and 7 because it's like, do I want to talk about like the one that I like, or do I want to talk about whatever the fuck was going on in 7? And then it was like, I don't really know what was going on in 7. And then I was also like, I was trying not to take too long because I always end up being the last person to message you. So I was like, and then I was thinking about, I had it narrowed down to 6 and 5 by the time I sent it. So I'm really glad that they ended up being paired together.
Yeah.
I don't think I could find that much to say about 7, but I think about it a lot. Like sometimes I'll just be sitting around thinking like, what were they thinking in part 7?
Oh yeah, no. Yeah. The franchise is just that's what I like about the Friday the 13th franchise is just that at least they were taking wild swings.
Yeah.
They figured out, I think, after Tommy Jarvis stuff that just, let's not worry about continuity. Let's just make just every movie after this point is just going to be something different. It's just going to be Jason doing, Jason versus Carrie, Jason in New York, Jason, dead Jason, becomes a spirit. Um, and then Jason goes to space. It was great.
Yeah. It was
Each one of those,
it's a lot of
even
fun.
Jason Goes to Hell, as much as it's, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people consider it to be the worst one, that there's still some fun and interesting things in that.
Just the
So,
not to call you out in the part 5 and 6 episode, but just the way that you said that makes me feel like maybe 9 is not your least favorite. Do you...
honestly, I'm not sure which one's my least favorite.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was
I gotta
dying to
kind of
know. It's
rewatch them all.
like
Yeah,
let's
I gotta kind of rewatch them all first, and it's been a little while since I watched them last. So that was another reason for doing this series of episodes was to kind of refamiliarize myself with it and go, okay, which ones do I like, which ones don't I like?
I will admit, like one of the on my rewatch, that was one of the biggest transitions because I had hated Jason X for a long time. I was just so mad at it. I actually remember really liking 9, but I only remembered one part of 9, and it was like watching back the rest of the movie as an adult, with critical thinking skills. I was like, oh no. Oh no, no, no. This is why did I like this one? Um and it was
Yeah,
very much it was the same with 4. I remember really liking 4. And I know it's a fan favorite, but
yeah.
oh boy. Uh
See, I'm one of those people that actually really likes Freddy versus Jason, and I actually really like the reboot. So uh
the the Friday reboot or the Nightmare on Elm
yeah.
Street
No,
reboot?
no, the Friday reboot.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Obviously that's not a high on your list.
No, it was not high on my list. It was another one of those movies where I had to question studios should leave writers alone, I think.
Yeah.
Because it was one of those things where they I think wanted to start over a new Friday franchise, but then they were
Yeah,
like, you've got to show the mask. And they were like, well, he doesn't get the mask until 3. So then they kind of tried to recap like the first part
yeah,
of the killing spree, and it was like the pacing in the new Friday the 13th is
yeah. The
kind of rough.
the reboot is definitely a mashup of the first three. It's you're kind of fast forwarding through some of it and getting to the mask, and you know but I don't know. There's I like it. I again, I'm going back through these and maybe I'll like it less this time. I don't know. But
I will say I'm with you on Freddy versus Jason though.
oh,
That's
Freddy versus
just
Jason, I that will always be one of if not my favorite of the franchise.
it gets
So
a lot of hate, but it's just
it does.
fun. Like
It's
it's just
to
a
me,
fun
it's a great
movie.
to me, it's a great um mashup of both of those series that takes both of the characters, does something well with both of them, like encapsulates the essence of both of those characters so well, and is just a fun, dumb action horror movie.
It is. And people like I see a lot of hate for Freddy in that movie because the his body count is practically non-existent, but it's like he
Right.
gets to be like a puppet master, you know?
Yeah,
Like
he's
he's
he's he's
doing what
he's
he
making
does.
Jason kill everybody.
Yeah.
So
It was a good arc for him. It was a
yeah,
fun time.
yeah.
And
All
at the end
right.
of the day, all of the Friday the 13th movies, it's a fun franchise, you know.
Oh
It
yeah,
does what it does
absolutely.
very well, which is campiness and scares and yeah. I'm glad I
Yeah, and I think that
revisited it.
yeah, and I think that's what's great about it too is that like I said, sure we have the Tommy Jarvis trilogy, and that and even 1, 2, and 3 kind of follow each other in sort of an arc,
Mhm.
in a narrative arc. And so you got these two little trilogies, and then everything after that is just kind of individual movies that don't really there's no real sense of narrative to it between the movies. And so but overall it's just a fun series that doesn't take itself too seriously, isn't trying to take itself too seriously.
Which is nice.
Yeah, yeah.
I know
I
it was
that's
more the status quo when these came out, you know, but it's as someone that grew up with movies that did take themselves way too seriously
yeah,
a lot of the time, it is nice to see something that's not afraid to just take wild swings.
right. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it whenever I talk, at basically any horror series that I like, especially slashers. Scream is always up there highest for me. That's always my favorite slasher franchise. But Friday the 13th is next. So just because it's just fun.
It is, and I've had a blast revisiting it. I'm glad that I got to come talk about it.
Yeah, I'm
It's been
glad to
fun over the last
glad you
year to relearn the joys of Friday the 13th.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm glad you were able to get the box set and dig deep into it.
Yeah, it's been great.
Was there anything else you wanted to say about either one of these movies?
I don't think so. I'm glad that these were the two that I got to talk about because I think it's a very interesting and I'm glad that I got to see the to be here for the end of the Jarvis arc. I was kind of
Yeah.
surprised that they didn't bring him back like one more time.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah, it is
glad,
interesting.
but
Yeah.
surprised.
Yeah. Maybe if they manage to reboot the series in any way, once all these legal issues are cleaned up and everything, maybe since they're doing that TV series, uh I'm sure that Tommy Jarvis will be back in some way. So
Yeah, I hope so.
all right. So why don't you let people know where they can find you online, and anything else you want to plug?
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter at cat_Voleur, VOLEUR. You can check out my website, catvoleur.com, which has links to all of my books and anthologies and stuff. And then check out the other two shows that I'm on, Slasher Radio and This Horror Life, pretty much wherever you find podcasts.
All right, great. Well, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll definitely get you on again.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thanks again to Kat for joining me. Next episode, Dev Elson joins me to talk Friday the 13th, Part 7, The New Blood, and Friday the 13th, Part 8, Jason Takes Manhattan. Thanks for listening. If you liked what you heard, make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app or at creepyandgeeky.com. You can follow the podcast on social media at Creepy and Geeky on both Twitter and Instagram. If you'd like to follow me, I'm Geek Thulu on Twitter and geek.thulu on Instagram. You can support the podcast by ordering teas and more from our TeePublic page. All of the links are in the show notes. Finally, don't forget, stay creepy.